So I'm gonna touch on. I'm definitely going to touch on a few themes you've already heard today, but hopefully give you some really good reasons why podcasting is something you really, really need to be embracing now. And I know we've got freelancers in the room, we've got people running companies as well. I always like to have a rough sense of sort of who I'm talking to. So just a quick straw poll. Just put up your hand if you currently listen to podcasts. So audio. Okay, that's pretty much almost everybody. If you're someone who consumes podcasts with video, put up your hand. Okay, so that's pretty healthy. And if you do both, put up your hand. Okay, so we're definitely dealing with an audience who know what podcasts are, which is good, and I'm sure have plenty listening. Just a quick bit on me, sort of as Justin touched on. This was me last year, so I was heading up the global podcast division for Sony. This is me in the US. This is me just a few weeks earlier, because for 20 years, I don't know why you're laughing. It's very rude. For 20 years, I was one of the co-owners of something else, which may be a business that some of you are familiar with. And something else was very much, we grew out of audio. We were initially a really radio production company, but we, during the noughties, evolved into be really one of the UK's first multi-platform production companies at a time when folks just didn't really understand what that meant. And then when podcasting came along, we were able to pivot our audio folks. And as Justin said, really something else was pretty much one of the first businesses in the UK to really embrace podcasting and start to make money from it. And I was very fortunate to sort of lead that area of the business. So now I left Sony at the end of the year. So now I work and advise companies, and I'd love to have a chat with you, obviously, over lunch. I'll be around. So 10 and a half things to think about in terms of why podcasting might be right for you, whether you're a freelancer or whether you run your own business. And the first of those is really when we start to think about the audience. I'm sure I don't need to tell you that TV is having struggles, and certainly the linear TV audience is going down, and we see the same pattern behavior going on in the States as we do here. If anything, the States is slightly advanced. And certainly when I was living over there's a whole bunch of channels in the States that sort of reach people who are over 70 and no one else. And that's slightly concerning, I think, if your whole business is framed around TV. For podcasting, it's quite the opposite. The audience growth is super aggressive. I'm going to share with you a bunch of stats from some research that's done by Edison. It's called the Infinite Dial Research. You can go online, it's free to see, and the stats are the UK stats, and the newest research comes out in about a month's time. So do go on, and you'll see a whole bunch of stuff there, not just about podcasting, but just about audience behaviours as a whole, so worth checking out. So podcasting at the moment, about 51% of the UK audience, or the UK population, is consuming each month. And you can read that, I think, both ways. One is, from a standing start of about 10, 15 years ago to that is pretty aggressive. Obviously, it also means there's a long way to go until we're at full penetration, and certainly this audience is probably skews to a high consumer one in a way that there's plenty of people around the country who are not quite there yet and are getting there. But interestingly, when you start to look at younger audiences, that number gets much higher, as you might expect. And certainly, I think what you've seen with podcasting is exactly what we saw with streaming on TV. Once people get the on-demand habit, they don't go back. Why would you? Really interesting, 59% of listening and viewing is happening in the home, and that is an absolute direct threat to TV. Of course it is, because that's TV's domain. I mean, as we already know, and as Rowan was touching on, the beauty of podcasting is there's lots of other things you can do, certainly when you're listening, and certainly when you look at both what Spotify and Apple are doing now, they're making it very easy for you to switch between video and audio depending on how you're consuming your podcasting. And certainly all the early research is showing that video consumption of podcasting is additive to audio. It's not cannibalizing the audio audience. And again, thinking about that from a TV perspective, that's pretty terrifying, because what that's doing is bringing new audiences to podcasting and also extending the amount of time that people are spending with podcasting. Okay, point number 2, you are not late to this party. If you haven't yet engaged, and you've heard some great case studies this morning, I wouldn't worry. You're actually early. And why do I say that? I say that because when you think about the commercialization of podcasting, we're really looking at a baby industry. This is 10 years old, basically. People have not been making money in podcasts much more than 10 years ago. So it's a very, very early stage. it's really difficult to estimate the whole pie and what it means from a revenue perspective. But Hernan Lopez, who was the guy who set up Wonder, is giving it a pretty good bash with a consultancy he now runs. And about 18 months ago, he came up with this figure. He said the podcast industry globally is worth about 7.3 billion. The reason I put ish is because I think that's now an underestimate to where we are, and I'll show you why in a second or two. But even so, when you look at that number, it is minuscule compared to what the TV industry is, the music industry is, the advertising industry. When you think of any other creative industries, this is still a baby industry. And so for you, that's fantastic. We're still very much at the start. Where was TV after 10 years, or where was radio after 10 years? We're at the very early start of an industry. So when we think about that 7.3 billion number, how does that break down? Well, look, all of you as podcast listeners will know that the main form of advertising is host read ads. It's also the biggest way to earn money because you can charge the most for those ads, and it continues to be a big, big chunk of the pie. Rowan was talking about programmatic ads, those sort of radio type 30-second spots that we hear, and that remains very, very important. Branded content is growing, and this is where I think there's definitely an underestimate going on with Hernan's numbers, just because the industry is growing so fast. But, you know, white labeling, making shows either for broadcasters in terms of companion shows or brands. I mean, you know, when I was at Sony still, we had clients such as Chanel and Rolex who were spending really significant money for us to make podcasts for them, branded obviously as Chanel and Rolex podcasts, sitting on their own channels and platforms. And then this black area is, I think, really, really interesting, the sort of subs live space, subscriptions and live. And this is definitely growing, and I'll show you in a minute or two latest numbers from Patreon, which is what gives me the confidence to say that that is an underestimate. But even if we take that 7.3 number, as I say, baby industry, still a long way to go, a lot of growth happening in all these different revenue areas. Okay, so point number 3 is really the opportunity is only getting bigger. And there's a few really good reasons for that. And without sort of pissing off my good friend Rowan and talking about other platforms, one of those is what Apple have recently done. So Apple have now also announced that video has come to the platform. And if you use Apple Podcasts, you'll see that. It started about a month ago. But the really interesting thing about what Apple have done is they're allowing what's called dynamic ad insertion. So the fantastic thing about podcasting is, as a creator, if you're a creator, you have the ability, obviously, to sell your own ads, your host read ads, into podcasts. Those are dynamically inserted. So in other words, they can be there for a specific amount of time, or they can be there for a specific geography. If you're lucky enough to have a show that runs in the US and the UK, you can sell different ads in different territories on the same episode. Apple, unlike Spotify, are allowing those ads to be sold by you, the podcaster, into the videos that you host. And so that obviously means that you've got the chance to monetize to a really good level, because it means if Cadbury's an advertiser for you and they only want to run an ad for a couple of months, it can come out, and after a couple of months you can sell that space again to someone else. And it also, of course, means that you can start to do the same sell across audio and video. And interestingly, last year YouTube announced that they're going to be introducing it as well. They haven't said when it's coming. It's going to come this year at some point. But with Apple and YouTube both doing that, what that really has the potential to do is to lift the price that can be charged for podcast advertising because of that joint sell. And it'll be interesting to see if Spotify think about introducing that as well. Subscriptions are exploding. So this is a really new revenue area, 3-4 years old on podcasting. But Patreon, Substack, Apple and others all now offer you the opportunity to not only make money through your advertising, they allow you to make money by charging people small micro amounts to get exclusive extra content or early content or maybe ad-free content. And I think particularly the fact that Patreon are now starting to become a really serious player in this space is super, super interesting. And I'll share a number of theirs in a minute or two. Of course, everyone's aware of what Netflix are doing. 50 podcasts bought last year, creating their own podcasts as well. And when you think about the cost of what those podcasts are, it's a sort of idiot-free bet, really, because for the amount of money you have to spend on one late-night chat show, if you're making that in a traditional TV space, and the amount of money you can spend buying up 50 existing podcasts, you've only got to get 3 or 4 of those to be a hit and to work. And kind of the ROI, the return on that investment, is really, really worth it. And of course, the early signs from Netflix have been very positive. There's quite a lot of anecdotal stuff coming out now that they're very pleased with what they're seeing. And so where Netflix have trodden. I'm sure we're going to see other streamers following. We already are really in the States, but I'm sure here as well. Number 4, podcasting removes the middleman. I mean, I think you all know this, and you've sort of heard this morning, but who is the middleman? It's the commissioner. And what a fantastic freedom to be in a place where you're not reliant on the commissioner anymore. And once that happens, it means that you have the chance to directly create revenue for your business. And that is super liberating. And I can tell you that as someone who's genuinely been on that journey. Something else for many years was stuck in that commissioning model. And we made that pivot and started releasing our own content. And the liberation that comes with that, first of all, creatively, but secondly, obviously, from a revenue perspective, you care a lot more when the revenue's coming into your pocket and not someone else's about how that thing is performing and how you can make it better. So where do you see that revenue creation from? A few things we've already touched on, but to give you a bit more detail. First of all, advertising. I couldn't find a really comparable UK number, but in the US, the ad market in 24 grew about 26%. It's going to be similar for 25 when those numbers come out, and we're certainly seeing similar paces of behaviour in the UK. And I can tell you, just from my own experience of what I was seeing at Sony, I was seeing that in the UK last year. Big blue chip brands now flocking to podcasting in a way they didn't a few years ago. If you were a podcast listener 4 or 5 years ago, you'll know you were hearing ads from folks like Squarespace. And now when you listen, you hear ads from folks like Airbnb. There's a real difference in the type of advertisers who are coming. Subscription I've chatted about in terms of how that's growing. Patreon just 2 weeks ago announced that last year they saw a 33% increase on the amount of money that they generated from subscription around podcasts. I mean, that is super significant, because what that starts to do is to say to you that even if you're a small niche podcaster, there's another revenue source for you. It doesn't just have to be about advertising. IP exploitation, everybody is, of course, super familiar with in terms of making that move from the IP you're creating online into TV, and we've heard a few examples of that today. But the other super interesting thing about it is, of course, the live side. If I'd have said to you 10 years ago that on-demand radio shows are going to fill the O2, you would have thought I was absolutely bonkers. But of course, that's exactly what is happening at the moment, and it's proliferating to a really quick degree now, where sort of live shows are really starting to, for the right sorts of podcasts, generate significant sorts of money. And of course, the commissioning model does still exist, but what's interesting is certainly in podcasting, there's the opportunity for what I like to call commissioning with incentives, which in effect means revenue share. The chance for you to share in the positives of how a show's doing, and if a show does really, really well, the chance for you to bring in more money along with that check that might be underwriting the production of the show. Okay, number 5, TV clients deny you the most important metric at this current time for your business. And what, of course, am I talking about? I'm talking about data. Data is the golden currency. And if you run a business at the moment, you have to be thinking how you can ensure that your business is starting to tap into data. On TV, they own that. In podcasting, you do. And that is transformative for your business. Why is it transformative? Because it starts to give you access to real-time audience info. All the platforms give you that in a way that you just don't see on TV. If you have a show that is starting to develop subscription, email addresses start to become super valuable. Of course they do, because you're then in communication with your audience about the live show, about the merch, about the newsletter you're going to release, about the fact you're releasing a brand new show that has nothing to do with the existing show, but which they might be interested in. It allows you that direct dialogue with the audience in a way that you just don't get on TV. Number 6, and again, we've heard a little bit about this earlier, but look, podcasting is a different creative challenge, and it's important if you're coming from the TV world that I think you have a little bit of humility about that as well. It's not the same. It's not, TV on a small screen or TV without the pictures. It's a different challenge. And Rowan touched upon this, which is podcasting is about habit, and habit creates community, and community creates fandom. And it's community and fandom that are going to drive your revenue model. We heard that in the last session. That regularity of release, super, super important. But that's not the only creative challenge or benefit, I guess, because the other thing about podcasts are that they're iterative. This is absolutely the trial and error medium. So what do I mean by that? Well, kind of as we were hearing in the previous session, if you're releasing on a regular basis, podcasting allows you that ability to just keep dabbling with things, changing things, trying things out, changing the artwork. I'm sure all of you are aware of Diary of a CEO. It's now one of the world's biggest podcasts. Go and listen to episode 1 of that, and you will not recognize that from the show that you hear today. It is completely different. And I say that in a positive way and with credit to Stephen Bartlett and his team, because that's exactly what they've done. They've figured out as they've gone along what is or isn't working. When I was at Sony, we used to do a thing called mid-mortems, which after about 20 shows, we'd get together all the research we could on a show. We'd look at all the stuff coming in from Spotify and Apple and everyone else, our own research. We'd look at all the episodes that had been released, and we'd try and figure out what was or wasn't working. And a real-world example for you is we had one show where we could see that in the first 5 minutes, more people were dropping off from that show than we would normally expect to see with a weekly show. And what that basically suggested to us was that the opening monologue was too long. People were getting bored of it. And we had a chat with the host about that, and sure enough, the monologue got tightened up at the start, and sure enough, that percentage went down. So being able to do that all the time is, again, really creatively liberating, but also, I think, a different creative mindset to the one that obviously you have on TV, which is, I'm creating 12 episodes, I'll deliver it to the commissioner, and I'll cross my fingers that it gets recommissioned at another time. Number 8, you are already a podcast business. Trust me on this. You are already a podcast business. You just don't know it. And I'll explain why. Because you're sitting on a bunch of skills that are super helpful for you in terms of starting to engage with this area of the creative industries. You know how to sell ideas, obviously. You understand how to tell stories and create formats. That's what podcasting's about. Crucially, you are a subject expert, whether you're a freelancer or you're someone running a business. There's going to be subject areas that you specialize in, the types of programs you maybe already make, and that gives you an in as well into the podcasting space. You have relationships with talent. We've already heard about that this morning, how that can open up doors and allow you the ability to start creating stuff within the digital environment. You can obviously shoot, light, and edit. And actually making the move to audio editing is a lot easier than video editing, and therefore it is something you can make a leap on. And as we were hearing before, just that ability to start playing around and editing yourself, you'll figure it out quick enough. Trust me on that. And of course, as TV producers, video is your bridge into podcasting. The fact that video has become a serious part of the podcasting ecosystem is a real benefit to you because, of course, in some ways, it's a confidence booster, right? You can get into the space sort of with a medium that you know to some degree, and then figure out the audio piece that has to go alongside that as well. However, and so bearing in mind what I just said, do bring in experts. Have the humility to recognize that you don't know what you don't know, and this is a different creative challenge. Rowan touched on the fact it's I think, a medium that focuses much more heavily on the audience than TV necessarily allows you to do so, where again, it's that thing of cross my fingers and hope people come to the show and find it. In podcasting, you see that audience reaction going on. You're able to figure out what is or isn't working, and therefore the focus is very, very different. Number 9. Celebrity and influencer culture are colliding. And what do I mean by that? And I saw this in the States really significantly. So when I was in the States, I was really struck by how often actors or TV talent, daytime TV show folks would come to me and say, I'm setting up my own production company, or I've already set up my own production company, I'm going to launch 5 shows. And in effect, what they were doing was looking at what was going on in the influencer space, with influencers owning their own content, and of course, celebrities feeling they want to do exactly the same. And pleasingly, we're now seeing that, I think, happen in a much more significant way in the UK. Certainly in the last 6 months, big moves from Romesh and Anton Deck and Louis Theroux, all looking to own their own content. And some of them already had production companies. Some of them were already trying to get stuff commissioned on TV. But the sea change now is they're saying, I'm going to release my own content, I'm going to be in control of the revenues, and I'm going to be in control of the creativity. But the plus side for you guys is certainly what I see with a lot of these examples is they absolutely need a partner who knows how to make stuff, who understands the medium, who can guide them through that. And not just from a creative perspective, but from a business one as well. And that can potentially throw up really great opportunities for you. So point number 10, this is, I think just a really encouraging one for you, which is there's a really low barrier to entry. I mean, we heard about shows being made for 700 quid. I mean, I think probably some shows are being made for a little bit more than that. But in effect, that level does allow you to get in and frankly, just start playing around. And I think you sort of heard that on the case study we were just listening to. That chance to sort of throw off the shackles a little bit and get out of the mindset also that says something, I'm not going to let anyone see this till it's perfect. I'm going to go through 1,000 edits and I'm going to spend 9 months or 12 months or 2 years making something. It's a very different mindset where you say, I'm actually going to put myself at the mercy of the audience a little bit. And I'm just going to start releasing stuff and seeing what happens and figuring out what is or isn't resonating with an audience. So it's a great opportunity for you as people who already have content skills to then start thinking about what that can mean for you in this space. So if none of that has been convincing for you at all, here's point 10 and a half, which is, brackets 11 really, but it always sounds a bit more clickbaity when you can say 10 and a half things. So point 10 and a half is really the business case for sort of doing this, because the truth is by embracing podcasting, whether it's audio, video, or both, it's creating greater value for your business. And why do I say that? And this is true, by the way, whether you're one person or you're 100, right? It's really, really important. So why do I say that? Well, for some of the reasons I've touched on already. IP ownership, the fact that you can start to fully own what you're doing. Direct revenues, seeing those revenues come directly into your business. And I think personally, most importantly, data ownership. The ability to own that data is something you don't get from TV. And of course, the way podcasting has now evolved, where it's absolutely an audio and a video medium, means ultimately you become a multi-platform producer. And frankly, that's pretty hot in 2026. So, and also, speaking as someone again who went on that journey with our own business, that's what we saw as well. It's an interesting space to be in. So look, good luck with everything. As I said, I'll be around later to have a chat. Thank you very much. Thank you.